Hello. All right, I have no microphone, so I'm going to shout at you. So don't be offended if I shout at you. If at any time you can't hear me, please let me know. I will shout louder. My name is William J. Martin. My friends call me Bill. I am your neighbor. I live in Westwood. I grew up in Closter, just to give you a little bit about myself. And welcome to Permits 101. I want to start by telling you a little bit about myself. I am an architect licensed in the state of New Jersey. I'm also licensed in other states. I'm also licensed as a professional community planner. So I also practice that as well. I'm a member of the American Institute of Architects, which is an organization that promotes good design in order to help the public achieve health, safety, and welfare. My business is here in town on Boulevard, if you know where that is. And like I said, I'm licensed as an architect and a planner. I'm also licensed as a construction official in New Jersey. I'm licensed as a building subcode official in New Jersey, and I'll explain what that means in a minute. And I'm licensed as a building inspector. I have an HHS Class 1 building inspector's license. And what that means is that in addition to being an architect and a planner, I also went through the state training to become a licensed building inspector. The state trains inspectors. They have to have a background in the field, and then they have to pass tests, and they have to attend college courses that are at the community colleges. And if you pass all of that, you get these licenses, and that makes you eligible to be hired by a municipality to act as a building official, either an inspector, building subcode official, or a construction official. I'm also serving some appointments in Bergen County. I'm a member of the Bergen County Historic Preservation Advisory Board. And right now I have the municipal appointments. I'm chairman of the Westwood Zoning Board of Adjustment. I'm the Class 2 member of the Westwood Planning Board. And I am the Class A member of the Closter Historic Preservation Commission. Now, the reason why I wanted you to know this is because I have been trained in just about any and every bureaucratic nightmare in New Jersey that you could possibly face when it comes to dealing with buildings, whether it's historic preservation or otherwise. In addition, I have appeared on CNBC. I was on a show called On the Money to specifically talk about aging in place, which is kind of the purpose why this organization asked me to speak. And that was about 5 or 6 years ago. So this is not a new issue, but I can touch on that. There's a lot of different ways. This is not the first time I'm talking about this subject, but this is the first time I'm talking about it in this kind of a format. So this is a little bit new for me, so I apologize if I get off track. There's so much to discuss that I kind of simplified it a bit. And what I want to do is I want to go through what I'm going to tell you about the various agencies in the borough that reviews for building permits and zoning. And then that should take about 45 minutes. And then I'm happy to answer any questions you have after that for the coming hour or longer on just about anything building or construction related that you might have a question about. So let me get started by talking about, this is what I hope to cover: what to expect when applying for a building permit, what to expect from a zoning review, what to expect from the building department. I want to explain to you how the various laws interact: the state land use law, the local zoning code, and the state building code. And I'm going to start with that. The state land use law is referred to as the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law. And that is the state law that empowers or delegates land use activities and the creation of boards to the local municipality. So the state has all the power, and then through these laws, they delegate authority to municipalities. So the MLUL is what we call it, the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law, sets forth the process and criteria that must be followed let's stay here, at the local level. Basically, it's a lengthy law. It's this thick, and it describes what towns are allowed to do, how they're allowed to be set up, and the state law is such that it allows for the creation of planning and zoning boards. It allows for, it dictates that process exactly, so that the process of going to the zoning board or the planning board in any municipality is very similar, because they're all following the same law. This law also describes the criteria under which these things have to operate. For example, if you go to a zoning or a planning board and you are approved, they have to tell you why you were approved. If you were denied, they have to tell you why you were denied. They have to tell you exactly why. Not, oh, we didn't like it, or we didn't like the color of your tie. Or it's this very specific criteria that governs the behavior, approval, or denial. As I said, the application process in going through zoning or planning boards is virtually the same in every municipality. There's slight differences, but the criteria is supposed to be the same everywhere. Our local elected officials, mayor and council people, cannot interfere or modify that process that's dictated through the state. So a lot of people think, well, I'll go, I didn't like, the building inspector denied me, I'm going to go to the mayor. It doesn't work like that. They're not allowed to interfere in that process. And I can tell you, having been involved in Westwood for 25 years, it doesn't happen. People may try, but it doesn't happen. And this is mostly to assure equal protection under the law when someone applies for permission to do something. It's not about whether we like you or not, or who you know. It's about, this is the process. You go through the process and you get an answer one way or the other. Okay, the next is the local zoning code. Our local zoning code is created through the municipal land use law, and it is created by our local officials. So we have a zoning ordinance in Westwood, and it was compiled by professionals that write zoning laws, like professional planners, and they analyze the land use patterns and they develop zoning so that they can create criteria such as setbacks and height limits and the things that that are limited, so that we don't have overdevelopment and we don't have problems in the land use in the neighborhoods, in the downtown, in the industrial zones, and all of that stuff. Let me just skip ahead here.
How often are those redone?
How often?
Yeah. Like, as you know, as
the
needs change and
right.
grow, like how often is it reassessed?
The New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law requires re-examination through the master planning process every 10 years. Okay? It used to be every 6 years. In my opinion, 6 years is too long, let alone 10. A lot of things can happen in 10 years. So, but there is a statutory requirement to re-examine the master plan, and from the master plan, the zoning ordinances are modified or changed by the mayor and council. The way that works is the planning board is in charge of the master plan. They review and adopt it, and that's going on right now, by the way. If you go to the planning, we're in the middle of that right now, and we're probably going to be concluding that within the next month or month and a half, and there will be a public hearing. So the information's available online. If you have a question about something, you don't like something that's being suggested, you can come to the hearing and be heard. And all of these hearings are open to the public. But like I said, the state about 5 years ago extended it from 6 years to 10, but I have been urging the mayor and council to not wait that long. I mean, look, 10 years ago, the internet wasn't a big deal. Now it's ruining retail. So we have to react more quickly if we don't want to get hurt by the things that are changing around us. But I hope to go over the process of applying for and obtaining a building permit to build an addition. I'm going to limit it to an addition as an example so that I can show you the different steps. Breakdown of the various municipal departments, local zoning review, what's involved with that, the building department review. I'm going to also talk about some common misconceptions, and then there'll be questions and answers. I touched on the municipal land use law already. The local zoning ordinance, our Westwood local zoning ordinance, is actually online. You can go on the borough website, which is what you see here on the left side. And I had my pointer, but I don't think it's going to work on the screen, so I'm just going to point. Right here it says Borough Code. you click Borough Code, and you'll get something that looks like this. But this will show all of the borough codes, not just the zoning ordinance. There's all kinds of rules that they make up and publish and that we have to, supposedly we have to follow, that govern all aspects of the municipality. But the zoning is one of those. So if you go to this, you'll need to look for Chapter 195, Land Use Development. Doesn't say zoning, so if you go to Z at the end, you're not going to find it. You know, more bureaucracy, they name it something, they make it hard to find. I don't think they did that deliberately, but it's the Westwood Land Use and Development. So you go to the website, and that's how you find it. When you go there, it's all there. Definitions, setbacks, it's everything that has to do with zoning in Westwood in any of the zones. So you've got it, if you're interested in a single family zone that you're in, find yourself on the zoning map, and then look for R1, R2. Those are the zones that we have. And then you get the criteria that applies to your property. But it's all available on the borough website. The zoning, like I said, comes from the state's delegation of local control through the state constitution, through the land use law, municipal land use law. So that allows the mayor and council to adopt a zoning ordinance, as I said, and hire and fill the position of zoning officer. Some towns, they call it the land use officer, like you see land use and development ordinance. Some towns call it zoning inspector. It's the same basic position. This person is hired directly by the mayor and council to be responsible for the initial review of applications to build something. And to inspect and make certain of zoning compliance by applicants. There's an official, he's called the zoning official. In Westwood, because Westwood is relatively small, our construction official is also the zoning official, but these are separate jobs. He just does both. But it's a separate position, and its authority comes from the zoning ordinance. The zoning spells out in detail all the specific local restrictions on houses as well as other buildings, exactly defines how big the property has to be, how big a house can be, how close it can be to the street property lines, how tall it can be, how much land the home can cover, how much driveway, patio, or other gravel surface you can have. These are all restricted. And how many garage car spaces are required. There's a requirement for garage spaces depending on the number of bedrooms. These are all real and exact limits on homes and apply equally to new homes and new additions. Any new construction, including home additions, must comply with all of the zoning requirements or make application to obtain a variance from the zoning board. And I will get into, I'm not going to go through all of the zoning board stuff tonight. It would take too long, but I will touch on that when I get through the zoning review and approval. One of the things that I want to emphasize is that the zoning is, these are real and exact limits. So, for example, there's a requirement in the R1 zone for a 10-foot side yard. That's 10 foot, 10.000 feet. If your property, if you're at 9 foot 10 inches from the property line, you are out of compliance. So you need to understand that these things are applied very, very specifically to properties. So if you have a house that's 9 foot 10 inches from the property line and you want to add an addition, the house itself is grandfathered, okay? It exists there now. You can keep it. But when you go to add an addition and you go to line up and your addition is 9 foot 10 inches away, that's a problem.
Does that apply to decks?
Excuse me?
Does this time apply to decks?
Decks.
It applies to, there are restrictions that apply to decks as well, and there are setbacks, and all of that is in the ordinance also. So, but my point is, there's no wiggle room. It's not like they can say, oh, you know, you're 2 inches too close, we're going to let that go. They can't do that. And it's very frustrating to a lot of people, and it's frustrating to me. I mean, I've had discussions with the borough attorney, and he says, no, we must apply it this way, period. So, all right, that's an important point because there's no gray area here. So everything is spelled out, and that's it. And that's why the Board of Adjustment exists, the zoning board, so that they can hear people who want to appeal what the ordinance says. Next slide here. Okay, this is, I'm going to explain the laws that govern the building code, because they're separate from the land use law and all this other stuff. New Jersey is a wonderful place to live if you can survive the bureaucracy. This is the website of the New Jersey State Department of Community Affairs. The Department of Community Affairs Codes and Standards Division develops the building codes. These are the building codes, not the zoning codes. The building codes govern how many studs you need in the wall, how big the windows have to be, all of the details that go into the construction of the building. The zoning covers where the building is going to be, how much ground it can cover, how tall it can be, so that they have different purposes. The building code is controlled by the state. Unlike the municipal land use law, where they delegated to the local officials, they control the building code. They set the codes, they set the limits, they set all the requirements, and the licenses that are given to the officials, the building inspectors, the building subcode officials, and the construction officials, those licenses are issued by the state. So those officials are answerable to the state for the proper enforcement of the building code. They're not answerable locally. They're answerable to the state. The zoning officer is answerable to the mayor and council because that law is local. The state building code, or as they call it, the New Jersey Uniform Construction Code, is completely in the bailiwick of the state. The New Jersey Uniform Construction Code, and I'm going to give you some useful links if you want to go on the state website. You can actually find the regulations. If you were to scroll down here, they actually list out all of the building codes, and it's not just one, there's like lots governing all aspects of construction. So this law, the Uniform Construction Code, sets forth the process and criteria that governs local building department's operation. So we have a building department here in Westwood, but the way that department operates is specifically set forth and controlled by the state. It's not controlled by the mayor and council. It has to operate under very strict requirements that the state enforces. And the state, from the Division Code and Standards, will send out inspectors to walk into building departments around the state to make sure that things are being enforced properly. The important thing for the state, from their standpoint, is they want the code enforced uniformly. That's why they call it the Uniform Construction Code. It's the same building code here as it is in Hillsdale, Patterson, Newark, Camden, Vineland, anywhere in the state of New Jersey. They want it to be uniform everywhere. There's an efficiency in that from the standpoint of people who are in the industry and are designing buildings, planning buildings, and building buildings. They don't want to have different rules in different municipalities. And believe it or not, in the 1960s, that's the way New Jersey was. Every town adopted its own building code, and every town had a different building code. Now, if you can imagine trying to build something in that kind of environment, it was a nightmare. So I believe it was in 1967, the state said, enough of this. We're using our authority as the state. We're pulling back this local control to the state. They set up the system, and now we have the New Jersey Uniform Construction Code. As I said, it controls exactly how the building department operates. Local officials cannot modify the process or the criteria that establishes building department operation or the building codes. They're not subject to local changes. This is to ensure that only qualified state licensed and state trained inspectors are enforcing the building code, as I said, that is the same or uniform in every town throughout the state. This is very important because the code has gotten very complex. The building codes and the inspectors, the purpose is to protect the health, safety, and welfare of the public who use the buildings. The state wants these buildings built safely. So that's why we have these inspectors, and that's why we have these laws. The properly qualified state licensed and trained inspectors are hired locally. So the inspectors, they go to the state, they go through the training, they get their licenses, and then they go to apply for jobs in the various municipalities. The mayor and council will interview, or a lot of times the borough administrator will interview them. They have to have the right license for the right position. A plumbing inspector can't be a building inspector. Plumbing inspector only inspects plumbing. So they interview, and then the municipalities hire them directly. But their licenses are issued by the state. So even though they're working for the mayor and council, they're not answerable to them. And that's set up deliberately that way. They're hired for a state-mandated 4-year minimum term. In some cases, they could be hired to fill out a term if somebody leaves. But the general idea is that when a town hires an inspector, they're in for 4 years. So unless they commit malfeasance or otherwise they don't follow the code or they get into trouble and it's properly documented, then you can get rid of them. But otherwise, they don't want political pressure to be able to be used on local inspectors because the health, safety, and welfare of the public is at stake. And I'm not saying elected officials are trying to hurt people. I'm just saying that sometimes they may not realize they're asking for things they shouldn't be asking for. And that's why the system is set up the way it is. And I have to tell you, having traveled around the country, New Jersey has one of the best bureaucratic setups, if you can believe it, in the world. Just so you know, when the Berlin Wall fell and the Eastern Bloc nations became free of the Soviet Union, they sent their officials to New Jersey to learn how to set up the institutions, such as building departments and building codes and such, to learn how to do it. They sent them to New Jersey, not to California. They all came to New Jersey to learn this. So that's how I know it's a good system. Plus, I can make some sense of it. If I can make sense of it, then I think it's a good system. Okay. The New Jersey Uniform Construction Code defines the various jobs and duties of local building inspectors in the town. These responsibilities are divided into 4 subcategories and 1 administrative category as follows. You have building official, building subcode official, fire subcode official, electrical subcode official, plumbing subcode official, and the construction official. So each trade within construction is identified by an official. In Westwood, because it's small, some of the officials have more than 1 license. We call that cross-licensed, and they can perform more than 1 duty. But these are, under the state law, these are actually designed to be 5 or 6 different jobs. And in municipalities like Newark or Patterson, where they have a big building department, there will be 1 person in each of these jobs rather than having 2 or 3 of the jobs done by 1 official. So the way the law is drafted, it's designed, it's kind of one size fits all. It works for local setups like ours. It also works for more urban setups. And it makes some sense. The construction official's in charge. He is responsible for the proper administration and the record keeping of the building department as spelled out in the Uniform Construction Code. And there are sections in there that outline his duties very specifically. No building permit can be issued without the signature of the construction official. He is the last person that looks at the permits before the permit gets issued. He is the only one who can order a permit to be issued. He, or if he delegates to another qualified a construction official who also has a construction official's license. So the construction official is the top dog. He or she is accountable to the state for the proper administration, as I said. They also review the reviews of the subcode officials. Now let me explain that. When you submit a set of plans, there's plumbing, electric, there's fire protection, and there's structural. Each of the 4 subcodes reviews their part. Building official will review the structural. Electrical will review electrical. Plumbing will review plumbing. And the fire subcode official will review smoke detectors, carbon monoxide detectors, things like that. Now, of course, some buildings are very big and there's more fire subcode official stuff to do, but in a house in an addition, which is the example I'm going to use, it's basically smoke detectors and such. Those subcode officials do their plan review and they sign off. Those sign-offs go to the construction official. He looks, he says, okay, signed off, signed off, signed off, signed off. You got all 4 of them. Now, the construction official will sign off on the plans and hand the information over to the technical assistant, who in Westwood is Linda Aiello. I don't know if you've been to the building department. She processes the paperwork and actually issues the permit. She is not the construction official. She is not in control of whether the permit gets issued or not. She is simply following the direction of the construction official. And if any one of those signatures is missing, any one of the subcodes is missing, the permits can't be issued. This is why it takes so freaking long to get a building permit. Because 5 guys got to look at it. And they all have different schedules. So if the electrical inspector is part-time and he comes in on a Friday, and the building inspector is part-time and he comes in on a Monday, you could have a situation where the electrical inspector is reviewing it, signs off, and then it doesn't get reviewed by the building subcode official for a week just because of the schedules. That's why it takes so long for permits to get issued. Sure.
Isn't there also a statutory max?
Yes.
From a permit application, I believe it's 20 days.
Yes, there is. There
What
is.
happens when that has been exceeded? Where do you go?
The Uniform Construction Code is silent on that. It doesn't say.
I'm not.
No. But this, listen, I'm an architect. I help people apply for permits in other municipalities, okay? They have 20 business days. That's 4 weeks. I can't tell you how many municipalities I go to where on the 19th day, I get plan review comments. In other words, the reviewer is reviewing and he says, is something missing? Or he's got a question and he writes the question, but they don't issue that until the 19th day. That resets the clock. So most municipalities don't do that, but some do. And when you submit, and I'm just going to go into this also, but I'll go into it now. When you submit a permit for review, it's the plumbing that goes first. It goes plumbing, electric, fire, and building. That's the order in which they're reviewed because there could be overlap and unintended overlap between the various subcodes before it reaches the construction official. So plumbing is straightforward. That goes first. So if you're getting plumbing comments and no other comments on the 19th day, that's a problem, okay? But that all reflects back onto the construction official. So the law says 20 days, but it says nothing about what happens if they exceed the 20 days. There's no penalty for them, and you cannot simply say, you've had the 20 days, I'm starting. You'll get fined.
So where do you go? What's your recourse as an applicant?
Okay.
Sitting there.
Okay, let's say it's 21 days and you've got no response from the building department and you have no permit. If you go to the state website, New Jersey Department of Community Affairs, Codes and Standards Bureau, they have phone numbers there. You can call the phone number. Now you have to look through and find the right phone number, but they have state officials. And I remember when I said earlier, these officials are hired locally, but they're answerable to the state. And I have done this myself. I have called the state and they will take the information. They say, okay, which official was it? Which municipality was it? What was it they told you or what was it they told you they couldn't do? And they usually wait about a day and they will call. They call the borough and they ask for that official. And that official gets on the phone with the state and then has to explain why they're not following the law or why they're unable to follow the law. Now, there's no penalty. They may have a good reason. They're not telling you. They may tell the guy from the state. But there is oversight. And if a town is consistently late or consistently ignoring these deadlines, Trenton will send an inspector to the town to review the records. It's kind of like an audit. It's like the IRS showing up and getting audited. They hate that. The local officials hate it when the state shows up because, it's a hard job. They're doing the best they can do. So these inspectors, when they come into the municipalities, they're always going to find something. You know what I mean? So anyway, so there is recourse if that happens, but there's no direct penalty and there's no quick answer. So if that happens and you call the state and they send an inspector, it could take months. So that's that. Now let's see, where was I? The activities of the building department are run by the construction official. These activities are reported to the state directly by computer, usually on a monthly basis. And by activities, I mean, how many permits did you issue? What were the use groups? What kind of buildings are they building in your town? How much were you charging for the permits? Did you collect all the fees? What's the status of inspections? The construction official has a portal that's connected directly to Trenton, and they enter all that data in every month. And the state uses that data collected from every building department in the state to track economic activity in New Jersey. The construction sector is a large sector of the New Jersey economy. So the state gets almost real-time data from the municipalities directly because of the way they control and delegate the authority of the state. So it's actually a good way to do things. Sure.
Going back to the subcode official?
Yes.
Are they solely looking at architect plans, or are they coming on site to review what to be done?
The-
I'm trying to figure out how the 20-day max can be
No,
utilized better.
the 20 days is for plan review. It's just for plan review. You submit the permit sleeve with the forms, and I'll show you that in a minute, and the plans. And they ask for 3 or 4 sets of copies, prepared by a professional, hopefully by an architect or an engineer, depending on what the building type is. If you're building a sanitation facility, it might be an engineer. If you're building a home, a library, a municipal building, it's going to be an architect. The law actually says architects do this, engineers do that.
I can't all 4 start reviewing at the same time?
No,
Why not?
they don't do it that way. Because sometimes there's overlap between. For instance, the fire subcode official, some of what he reviews overlaps with the building subcode official, and it's also true with the other subcodes. So they take plumbing first. When plumbing signs off, he hands it to electrical. Electrical signs off, he hands it to fire. Fire signs off, he hands it to building. Building signs off, he hands it to the construction official. That's the way it's set up. Now, the building subcode official is licensed as a building subcode official and an inspector. In order to get the subcode official and the construction official's license, you first have to have an inspector's license. That's the way it works. So in larger municipalities, there's a building subcode official, fire subcode, electrical subcode, plumbing subcode that never leave the building. They have separate inspectors that do the inspections. All the building subcode people do is they review plans. In cases like that, in the larger municipalities, the plan reviews go much faster because you're not waiting for the guy to come in. He's not wearing so many hats that he can't get everything done.
Is there self-certification?
Is there what?
Self-certification.
Self-certification? Self-certification is being looked at right now, but it's not yet in place. Okay, so that's the state code. Let me get back to where I was now. All right, let's go to the next one. Okay, now I'm going to start an overview of the process of applying for a building permit to build a typical addition. So you got a house and you want to build an addition. There's all kinds of things that you need building permits for, but for the purposes of my discussion, I'm just going to focus on that because I think it's clear and it's easy to describe what's happening and what the ultimate goal is to build an addition on your house. The first thing you have to do is you have to plan out what you want to build. Okay, if you have an architect, you're going to talk to them about what you want to do, and they're going to draw it out. They're going to talk to you about how it connects back in and all of that. Or if you're going to do this for yourself, or you just want to submit and see if you can get zoning approval for what you want to do, you're going to take your survey. Okay, this is a survey. Okay, it's what you got when you bought your house. It's a little drawing, usually on legal or 8.5 by 11. It shows the property lines. It shows where the house is, shows where the garage is if you have a detached garage, shows the driveway, the walkways, the front steps. All of that stuff is shown on the survey. The survey is an official document that's done by a surveyor, and it's certified to be very accurate. So it starts with that, because that tells you how far you are from your property lines, so that you can start to look and see what the zoning requirements are going to do when you do your addition. The important thing about the survey is when you go to apply for a building permit, you have to have a survey. The survey can't be more than 5 years old. So if you've been in your house for 20 years and you have a 20-year-old survey, you have to go back to the surveyor, and the surveyor's name is on there and his signature. Call them up. They have to come back, and they have to not resurvey everything, but they have to update the survey from 20 years ago. They'll give it a new date, a new certification, and then you'll have an updated survey. Yes?
Is that state law?
That is not codified, but it's necessary to prevent what happens. Sometimes the surveys are so old, and I've gotten surveys from some clients that were done in the 1950s. The land changes over time. Grass moves around, driveways get widened, all of these things that are restricted by zoning change. So the survey has to be fairly recent so that the official reviewing it has some degree of confidence that it actually reflects what your property actually looks like. They can't go out there and measure everything. They need the surveyor to do that. All right? So you get your updated survey, you decide where you want your addition. Here on the right side, you see this house was a ranch, and then they added a second floor. That's called an add a level. What I'm talking about here is more as if here's the house, and we want to add like a family room on the back. Okay, so we're going to have new foundation. The house is going to cover more ground. But just as an example, if this were a non-conforming house, and you go to build the second floor, even though the house is grandfathered, the second floor isn't. So you may still need a variance if you're not respecting the setbacks to the property line, even at the second floor. This is a site plan that's drawn from the information that's on the survey. And this is what architects and engineers do. They take the survey information, transfer it onto a new drawing, and then they add all these dimensions so that the zoning can be verified. And many times, the architect or engineer, mostly architects because that's what I am, will look at the zoning first and then tell you, okay, you can have your family room as long as you don't do this, as long as you don't do that, as long as you don't make it big, respect the setbacks, respect the amount of ground that can be covered by structure, and you work from the zoning towards what you can, because if you meet all zoning requirements, you can build your addition as of right, meaning you have the right to do it because you meet all the requirements. Okay. This is a zoning analysis table. This takes all of the requirements of the zoning, and this is actually a Westwood zoning analysis. Minimum lot area, minimum width, minimum depth, minimum building setback, maximum building setback, minimum side yard. Both side yards together have to add up to a certain minimum rear yard, maximum building coverage, breakdown of what that coverage is, impervious coverage, which is driveway surfaces are limited, impervious coverage breakdown. This piece here is actually under here, but I had to break it into two so you could see it. Floor area ratio, that is the maximum size that your house can be on all floors in relationship to the size of your property. Floor area breakdown, then we have height. Height is measured two ways in Westwood, 28 feet to the midpoint of the slope, with a maximum of 35 feet to the ridge height. And then garages, a 3-bedroom house needs a 1-car garage, 4-bedroom house needs a 2-car garage. So this is an analysis of that, existing conditions for the property, proposed conditions, and whether a variance is needed. Yes?
Yes, so that the 4-bedroom, 2-car garage, that's a requirement?
Yes.
Because I live in a 3-bedroom home.
Right.
I'd like to add one bedroom because we had a child, and my property will not allow a two-car garage. So how, I mean, is it are you basically saying that I can't add to my home, or are there other conditions that
No.
could be done, like,
Okay.
or considered?
What's happening in your case is that applying the applying the zoning to your unique situation can't be done. You can't comply. This is why the Zoning Board of Adjustment exists, so that you can appeal that decision to the zoning board, explain your situation.
So I have to take that step before I can even maybe consider an architect and all of that?
No, you're going to want to engage the architect before that. Yeah.
First, and then apply for the zoning in order to...
Yeah, when you apply for a variance, and I'm not going to talk about zoning board, but I will talk about this since we had the question. You're asking for very specific relief from what the code requires. So you have to know exactly what you're doing. You have to know exactly how big it's going to be, exactly how tall it's going to be,
And also, if I
before you apply.
There are other homes very similar to mine who have made this addition and they still have a one-car garage. So that's why I'm just kind of, I guess,
Okay, there's two answers for that. One is they may have been built prior to the zoning requirement of having the garage. Okay, so this, zoning changes over time. The mayor and council find that, people are building too many bedrooms. There's not enough places to put the cars. So they make a requirement for additions and new houses to have one car and two car garage, depending on the number of bedrooms. That's actually why they did that. But there were houses built before that requirement existed. They exist now. They're allowed to continue. But if they go to add an addition, if they have a one-car garage and they go to add a fourth bedroom, they're going to need a variance for that. Okay? Sorry. All right, so this is the zoning analysis. I do this separate from the forms, but the forms available at the building department actually have a similar kind of a breakdown. And you look at your survey, you have a site plan, and then you fill out the forms. There's examples of the forms on the table over there, so you can take a look at what they are. They're also available online from the borough website, which I showed you earlier. If you go, instead of going to borough code, you go to the building department section. There's forms. You can download the forms. They come as PDFs. You print them out. I think in some cases you can actually even fill them out on your computer. So the forms are all available. And the website has made things a lot easier in terms of getting the forms out to people. Yeah,
So if you know that you're going to need a variance, do you still have to go through the typical applying for it, get denied, and then go?
Yes. And the reason for that is the zoning officer needs to formally deny you so that it's clear as to what you're being denied for. If it's for a garage, it might not just be a garage. It might be garage and side yard setback. So the zoning officer needs to tell you that so that it's in writing, so that when you go to apply for your variance, you know what you're applying for.
And if there's multiple variances, then you get denied all at once, not...
That's correct. Well, theoretically, yes, you're supposed to get denied all at once. But what can happen is, and I talk about this under misconceptions, is that you have to disclose everything you're doing up front. If you don't, you could end up in a situation like that where you say, oh, I want to add a fourth bedroom. Oh, denial. Fourth bedroom needs two-car garage. Okay, and then you go to apply, and you didn't tell the zoning officer, or you didn't show the zoning officer that you also need a side yard setback. That's what you have to tell them everything, and that's why you need the plans up front. You need to know everything you're doing so that you can get the proper approvals in a timely fashion. If you don't disclose everything, it can take months just to get a zoning denial. And just like the 20 days of the building department, it's only supposed to be 10 days, 10 calendar days for the zoning officer to review your application for zoning approval. But if you don't give him enough information, he can't do it. So he's going to kick it back to you with comments, and then you go back and forth. And this is what causes a lot of delays. Okay, so that's a zoning analysis there. You also need, like I said, you need to know exactly what you're doing. Floor plans, elevations. You need elevations that are drawn to scale so that they can see how high it is. Because that's one of the things that they have to check. If they don't have a drawing to scale done professionally, they can't tell. And if you tell them, oh, I'm not going to build over the limit, and you end up building over the limit, they're going to stop your project. They're going to make you take it down. And this does happen. So you have to be careful of that. So in this case here, you see a first floor plan. In this particular case, the addition was in the back of this house. It was also a second floor. I'm not going to show you that. It's just part of the plan set. There's an example plan set on the table over there of what a zoning set, when you look for zoning approval, what should be part of that zoning set. If you're going to ask for a variance, you don't need all the construction details in the structural, because if they deny you, you will have paid for structural drawings you don't need. So you need the design layout, you need the site plan, everything that's being reviewed zoning-wise. There's an example set over there that shows you what that entails. And the construction details come later as part of the UCC review, which I'll get into when I reach that point. So here, plans elevation. Now we're going to break down the departments involved in the permit review. When you apply for a building permit, you're actually applying for 2 or more permits. The first permit is zoning, issued by the zoning officer, who isn't always the same guy as the construction official. And then there's the building department review, which is the state UCC review. That's a separate permit. You need both permits at a minimum. And in some municipalities, the county gets involved. If you're on a county road, sometimes they want to review and approve it. That's a county permit. There's also, because the state is worried about losing topsoil to construction disturbing the ground, Bergen County has a Soil Erosion and Sediment Control Bureau. That's a county bureau. Each county has one. And if you're disturbing more than 5,000 square feet of ground, you're required to get that as a separate permit. So there's 3, all right? If you're close to a stream, Department of Environmental Protection, the DEP might have to review and issue a permit. There's 4. So when you apply for a building permit, you're really applying for a whole bunch of stuff. For the purposes of this discussion, we're not near any streams. We're not disturbing more than 5,000 square feet. We're not on a county road. So all we need is a zoning permit and our building permit. Okay.
What if you back up to like another town's property? Do they have to review it too?
No, not unless you're building on that town part of the property. Most of the towns, and I've had this happen, where the town line cuts right through the property. Usually what they do is wherever the house is, that's the town that's going to do the review, even though part of the property goes into the other municipality. If your house is on the line, and I had a client whose house was on the state line between New York and New Jersey. He cooked his food in New Jersey, but he went to sleep in New York. And there's rules about that too.
So who got the taxes?
They both get the taxes because everybody pays taxes to everybody. There's just no getting around it here in New Jersey or New York. But I believe that there's an old English law, obviously this house was very old, that says that wherever the kitchen is, that's where the house actually is. So the kitchen was in New Jersey. I believe that that's how they settled it. And it became a New Jersey project, even though parts of it were in New York State. Back then, New York had a different building code than New Jersey, but right now, New York State and New Jersey have a very similar building code. That wasn't always the case. So the important thing here is there's more than one permit. And I've had a lot of clients say to me, oh, the zoning officer approved my plans and I've got my zoning permit, let's start building. I said, no, now we go to the building department. All right, so here we'll break down the departments that review. All right, zoning gets reviewed first because obviously if you don't conform to the zoning, it doesn't matter what the construction official tells you because you can't build it. So here you see a zoning compliance table. I showed you one before. All right, this one identifies nonconformities. There were no variances in this particular case. In this table is not for this property, but in this case, see how close it is to the side property line? When the addition lined up, that triggered a variance. This client had to get a variance for the second floor and for the rear addition. Okay, but zoning gets reviewed first for that purpose. If you need a variance, you need to know that before you get construction plans, because you can't do anything until you get that approval. All right. Okay. If your zoning permit is denied, you'll get what's called the denial letter. You had asked about that denial letter and do they give it to you right away? They have 10 days. If they deny you, as I said at the beginning, the state law requires that they tell you exactly why they denied you. They have to tell you why. This is an actual Westwood denial. All right? Well, the address would be in here, lot and block, and it says new deck 22 by 8, replace patio. Okay, it tells you what the project is. Then here it says blah, 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 lot and block, has been denied for non-compliance with provisions of articles. And then there's numbers. These numbers are in the zoning. So if you go to the website and you look these numbers up under the land use ordinance, you can see exactly why you were denied. And then in addition to citing the sections, which is required by the state law, they're also telling you here, require a minimum of 22-foot front yard setback to the deck. So he's telling you what the issue is. So here it is, you get a denial. What am I going to do? You get two choices. One is, and it's cut off on the bottom of here, but there's information about applying for a variance. The other thing you can do, and many people do this, is they go back, they look at their plans, and they adjust the plan to meet the requirement that they've been denied for. This is much preferred. Sometimes you have to change the shape of the addition. Sometimes you have to move it a little bit. It depends on what it is. But so you do that, and then you submit it back to the zoning officer a second time. And by the way, every time they review it, you got to pay a fee. I think it's a $25 fee for zoning review. I forget. It's 50 now? Okay. All right. Remember, I don't make these rules. I just understand them, and I could talk in excruciating detail about this all night long, so you don't want that. But believe me, I'm sympathetic because I have to deal with this. All right, so you go back, you change your plans, you resubmit. Boom, he approves it. Now you got your zoning permit. The zoning officer signs off. You have your zoning permit. And the reason why that's important is because the construction official is not allowed to accept your building permit forms until after he has that zoning officer's signature. He won't take the permit. They won't accept it over the counter unless you have the zoning officer sign off first. Okay. Now you're approved. Now you go and you get all the construction details that you need. The structural design, the beams, the sizes of the joists, the roof pitch, the rafters. You get all that information down. Electrical, light locations, outlet locations. You put all that on there. You put the plumbing on there. There's a diagram of the plumbing. All that information now goes into the construction plans. The zoning officer couldn't care less about where you put the plumbing. But the construction official, whose job it is to review for the safety of the structure, needs all that information. So you get all that information together, you have a set of plans, professional, sealed, signed, everything's in order, and now you've got to submit to the building department, and zoning review is done. Now we go to the building department, and there's more forms. Except now they're state forms instead of the local forms for zoning. There's examples of the forms on the table over there if you want to actually see the forms. This is the jacket, which is an oak tag folder. And inside that folder is 4, 5, or 6 more forms. Those forms break down by the various construction trades. So here you see the oak tag folder. You put your project site information on it. Then you have your building subcode. That information goes on this one. Fire subcode. The fire information goes on there. Electrical, number of outlets, number of lights, all of that. Any electrical device gets listed there. And then on the plumbing, how many fixtures you're going to have. Do you have the piping diagrams, all of that stuff. And why do they need to know this? Because they base the permit fees on what it is that you're doing. So each toilet costs you a certain amount to get inspected. That's what the permit fees are based on. All right? The fees, all right, the state law requires these inspections. The cost of the fees is set locally by your mayor and council people. But the construction official tells them what those fees have to be. And the reason why the construction official does that is because the construction official, under the Uniform Construction Code, is required to balance his books. He's not supposed to take in more fees than he needs to operate the department. And what that does is it prevents municipalities from inflating the fees and taking the excess income from those fees and diverting it to other things. Okay? So the construction official does his own cost projections based on the inspector's salaries, benefits, healthcare, whatever it is that they have in the department, office supplies, office space. The building department is allowed to charge the municipality is allowed to charge the building department for rent. So you can actually add that in to the operational cost of the building department, and the borough can get rent from the rental of the office space by the building department in its own town. This is allowed by the state. And the main reason this is done this way is so that the burden of the cost of the permits and inspection is borne by the person getting the benefit of the construction. Whether it's a developer building a shopping center or it's a homeowner doing an addition, your neighbor has nothing to do with your addition. They're not getting the benefit of it. They're not getting the investment value of that. There's no reason why your neighbor's taxes should be going to fund the inspectors coming to inspect your project. So that's how the system is set up. It's supposed to be self-funding, and it's not supposed to generate excess funding. And this is how the fees are set. Some municipalities, the fees are different than others because they have different employment rates amongst the inspectors and such. Okay? But they're set locally, they're approved by the mayor and council, but they're under the advisement of the construction official. Yes, you had a question?
Would the mayor and council be the check on the cost of the overhead for the building? In other words, who gives oversight?
The state. The state is interested in keeping the cost of permits low. The municipality might not necessarily feel that way. And it's important because the construction sector, as a sector of the New Jersey economy, is large. So if they're not careful, there can be unintended negative consequences to the economy by what I would call unintended misbehavior. So these things are very carefully regulated. They're allowed to run on their own until there's an issue, and then they swoop in and they audit these things. All right. So there's your 4 subcodes. You got to fill out all. You wouldn't fill these out. Your contractor would fill them out, or the architect. I tell my clients the contractor should fill them out because there are slots on these forms for the contractor to disclose consumer protection information. Contractors are required to have a registration number. Okay, that's required by the state. If you don't have a registration number, you can't obtain permits. So I advise my clients, the contractor fills out these forms so that those numbers are disclosed to make sure that the contractors you're hiring are properly registered to protect you in case something goes wrong. All right. After all those 4 subcodes are reviewed, construction official signs off, your permits are issued. This is the placard that goes in the window, the yellow placard. There's an example of it over there also. It's checked off as to what's being done, and it's signed off on the other side by the construction official, and then work can begin.
Is there an expiration date on that?
There is a 1-year expiration date. Technically, you're supposed to begin work within 30 days of the permit issuance, but that could be taking a spoon and going out in your yard and turning over some dirt and taking a picture. Okay, I've started my work because some people are not always ready to start right away. What'll happen is if the construction takes longer than 1 year, that's okay, but at the end of 1 year, the building department is entitled to a permit update fee. The computer systems they use automatically alert them. If you have not closed out your permit and finished your work within 1 year, they get a little alert in their email that says, call this project owner in and collect an additional fee, depending on what the work is. Okay, so that's kind of an automatic thing. It's also to prevent permits that are issued, people doing work and never applying for a CO, never closing out the permit and having this paperwork linger for years. So that's the answer to that. All right, some common misconceptions, and then I'm going to take more questions. The town inspectors are enforcement officials. They're licensed by the state. They have very specific jobs. They try to be helpful. They're not trying to hurt you, but they're not there. It's not their job to fill out the forms for you. It's not their job even to explain the forms, although if you go in and ask them, they probably will explain a little bit about the forms. You'll notice in a lot of the forms that they hand out, it says, have your architect fill this in. Get advice from a professional. The reason for that is because if you do that, even though it costs money, you'll get it much faster and it'll be right. Because if the information is wrong, they can yank your permit and make you tear down what you're building. So it's important to get the right advice. Do it right the first time. It's faster and cheaper to do it right the first time than it is to try to save money and get it wrong. Next is that permits are issued. The permits that are issued are only for the construction shown in the plans. So whatever you put in those plans, you get a permit for that. It's been reviewed. You have a zoning permit and a construction permit. If you're doing work beyond what's shown in those plans, you can get fined because that work hasn't been reviewed. It's not part of the permit fee, and they don't expect to be inspecting that work. So you have to be careful because some people, oh, I'm only building a deck, and next thing you know, they got a new kitchen. That's going to cause possibly a fine. You could end up having to rip parts of your kitchen out so that they can inspect what's behind it. These things happen every day all across New Jersey. It's not, I'm not making this stuff up. It really happens. So you're better off disclosing everything you're doing. Put everything on the plans that you're doing, even if you're not sure that it's something. I'm going to paint this wall red. They don't inspect paint, but put it on there. And you don't have to worry that it's going to cause you a problem. Any substantial change that you make to the project during the construction must be reviewed again for compliance. This includes both zoning and building. So if you get a building permit to build a kitchen and then you decide, the kitchen designer said, if I add 6 more inches to my cabinet, I can use a whole module and save myself a few bucks. So you make the addition 6 inches bigger. You can't do that. It's got to be reviewed. So it's not that you can't make it 6 inches bigger. It means that you have to revise your plan, submit a revision back, and they're going to check zoning and building again, and then they'll approve the change. They don't stop you from working, but you have to tell them as soon as you know you're going to change something, because if you just go and build it, when they inspect it and they find it, that could cause a fine. So any substantial change. And I'm not talking about simple things like I want to move the door 6 inches. I want to move my window 6 inches. I want little minor things. That you don't have to worry about. It's things like making it bigger, making it taller, things like that. All right. All aspects of the project are governed by code requirements. All the aspects need to be on the official plans. These are the plans they stamp when they give you the permit. They give you back 1 set of plans. They ask for 3 at the beginning. They stamp 1 and give it back to you. Those plans have to stay on the job at all times. If they're not on the job when the inspector shows up, he's going to ask for the plans because they don't carry everybody's plans with them when they go to do inspections. And they need to look at the plans before they can inspect. When they ask you for the official plans, if they're not there, or the contractor's got him in his truck and he's at another job across town, they'll cancel the inspection, but they do have the authority to fine you for that. So it's important that the plans be on site. Some people feel a need to downplay what they're doing. They don't want to, it's government, it's nobody else's business what I do, right, in my own house. If you downplay what you're doing and the permits don't match what it is that you're ultimately doing, you're going to have that same problem. They're going to come in, they're going to fail your inspection, they might fine you. And again, the fines are there they want people to comply. And most people want to comply, but they have to have these rules and they have to enforce them so that people will in fact comply. Here's some useful links. I believe it was in the handout that was given to you. The borough website, the zoning ordinance online, that's the direct link. If you want to type that into your browser, you don't have to go through the borough website. You go directly to the zoning ordinance code. New Jersey DCA, that's where the code regulations that the state issues, the building codes are there. And then the New Jersey Municipal Land Use Law, the overarching law that allows local zoning and planning and zoning boards, is the bottom link. Thank you for coming. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any questions you have. Let me take him, gentleman in the back. Yes.
Home improvement projects do not require permits.
Can you speak up?
What kind of home improvement projects in the house do not require?
Okay, there is a list of, believe it or not, there's a list of what you don't need permits for in the code, and it is defined under what they call ordinary maintenance. Okay, ordinary maintenance are things that do not require a permit in order to, and there's no inspection, there's nothing. Now, the Christie administration on its way out, in an effort to reduce regulation in New Jersey, added a whole lot of things that used to be work that needed permits into ordinary maintenance. One example is roofing. You used to need a permit to get your roof done. You don't need a permit to get your roof done any longer. The caveat is it still has to be done to code, but it's not inspected. So you have to be careful about the contractor you hire, because the contractor you hire is going to know he's going to put your roof on. No one's going to inspect that roof. So I wasn't particularly in favor of that because I think it leaves people vulnerable. But things like that, there was a whole list of them. They are listed online. But there's a clear list of what is required to have a permit and what isn't. The next category after ordinary maintenance, which does not require a permit, is called minor work. Minor work is a category of work where it requires a permit and requires an inspection, but you don't have to apply for the permit before you start the work. Your front steps fell down. You can't get in and out of your house. You can start that work right away, but you have to let the building department know that you've started minor work, and you have to apply for a permit at some point after that, and then there will be an inspection when they're done. There's no interim inspection. Yes?
What about if your hot water heater explodes?
If your hot water heater explodes, yeah, well, I haven't looked at the list, but there's also a category of work called emergency work, where you're allowed to do the work, and then apply for the permit afterwards. So the state, they list out all this stuff. I mean, everything is in one category or another, and it doesn't always make sense. But it's all there, and if you can understand the codes, you can read it all if you want. Yes, ma'am.
In the variance packet
Yes.
that they hand out once you've been denied, there's a whole bunch of fees. There's major work development,
Right.
there's minor site plan stuff.
Right.
And then there are municipal fees, like a permit fee, et cetera.
Right.
And I wish I don't have it with me, but then there's municipal escrow.
Yes.
And there's professional escrow.
Yes.
Can you talk to those things? Some of
Yes.
those numbers at $3,000
Yeah.
for a hardship permit is crazy.
Okay.
What are they about?
All right. There's an application fee. Let's say you're talking about an addition. You have to remember something about the zoning process and the zoning ordinance. It's one size fits all. So if a developer is building a shopping center, he's filling out the same forms you're filling out for your home addition. All right? The fees are set based on trying to anticipate every situation. There's an application fee, which is stated as an application fee. And then there are escrow fees. The escrow fees, if you're going to the planning or zoning board, are put into escrow to pay the professionals that advise the board. The board has an engineer, a planner, and a lawyer that advise at the proceedings. If you've been to any of the meetings, you know that those three professionals are up there. They get paid by the applicant. Again, the same way the building permit, the cost of that is paid for by the person getting the benefit of that development. It's the same idea. With the escrow fees, the escrow's put up, the board's professionals bill against that for their time, and when the application is done, approved or denied or whatever, the balance of the escrow is returned to you. So yes, it's $3,000 or whatever the mayor and council have set it to be, but the money that's left goes back to you. All right? Sometimes if an application goes on for many months, like a shopping center, it may exceed $3,000, it may exceed that amount, in which case, before the next hearing, the developer is required to post additional escrows to make sure that they're paying for the process that they're getting the benefit of. And that's what those fees are about.
There were two categories of fees, if I recall, escrows.
Yeah.
There is a municipal escrow, and then there's a separate one. I thought there were two.
Yeah, the municipal escrow is for the borough financial people to manage the application process and the money coming in. The board escrow, or what was the other category? Professional escrow? The professional escrow is the board engineer, the board planner, the board attorney to get paid for what they do in conjunction with the application. They may, excuse me?
Who determines the rate?
Their rates are reviewed each year at the beginning of the year when they're hired. Okay? As an applicant, if you feel you're being overcharged, there is an appeal process. You can appeal the charges back to the mayor and council. And what happens is, and I've had clients in other municipalities, they get all fired up when they have to pay it initially, but when they get to the end of the project, they decide that, you know what, I don't care anymore. It's done. I'm not going to go and appeal. I tell them they should appeal because the mayor and council don't know. They're not monitoring everything that goes on all the time. They won't know that you feel you're being overcharged unless you tell them. Then they'll review the fees that are charged to, against your escrow, and if they feel it's excessive, they have the authority to roll it back. So there isn't a process to appeal that.
And one more in regard to that. If the borough engineer, the attorney, and the planner all look at this and we're paying, I as an applicant,
Right.
a variant applicant, I'm paying them.
Right.
Do I have any benefit to be able to speak to them and get their knowledge except for the public hearing? In other words, because I, as an applicant, have been encouraged to hire an engineer, an
Right.
architect, a planner, an attorney.
If you need one. If you need it on your side of the application. The escrows that you pay for the board's professionals to advise the board. Okay? It doesn't mean you can't call them and ask a question, but they're not your engineer. They're not your architect. You hire your architect and pay your architect directly to prepare the plans and details that the board's professionals review. If the work that you have done for you by your professional is good, professional, and clearly and well done, the board's professionals will review it much faster. Where we have problems is where the professional on the applicant side isn't, I don't want to say doing a good job, is not providing the information readily. The engineer is reviewing partial information and more information keeps coming in. So he keeps spending more and more time. Now he's advising the board. That can drive up his fees that are billed against your escrows. So if you get good professionals helping you, the whole process is so much easier. It's so much faster. Yes.
I guess my question is more for your years of experience, but I'm going to explain to you how do you think this is going to pan out. Now, I have retaining walls that I'm replacing because they're falling apart.
Right.
Right? The contractor I hired started the work before getting the permit.
Okay, that's not good.
That's not good.
No.
Right? One of the retaining walls, while looking at the original survey that I had from when I bought the house,
Right.
over 10 years ago, goes over to the town's property.
Goes over the property line.
Goes
Yeah.
over the property.
How much?
3 feet?
3 feet?
Yeah.
That's a lot. Here's the problem with that.
2 feet? I'm not
Here's the problem with that. The zoning board and the planning board deal with the property. The streets, okay, your front lot line, the street, the sidewalk, the curb, and that's mayor and council. So they can't give you permission to build in the street. Now, that doesn't mean it doesn't happen.
Pre-existing.
Yes.
I'm not like taking or adding.
I understand. In situations like that I've been involved in, I've recommended to my own clients, move it in. Get it back onto your property because there's an issue of liability. What happens if somebody gets hurt on that spot? It's actually in the street. It's just like decaying sidewalk. Now, you can ask the mayor and council to give you permission to leave it there, but that's not a zoning issue. That's not the zoning board. That's not a zoning permit. That is a direct appeal to the mayor and council to allow that wall to stay where it is. They may let it stay, they may not. I mean, the towns have to dig up the streets every once in a while. If the town is letting people build stuff in their front yards in the street and they have to dig up a sewer line, they're going to destroy whatever, or it's going to be in the way. That's a problem, and that's why there's rules against that. But yes, there are situations like that. In my own house, I have retaining walls also, and they were right on the street property line, right on the line. And I had a wall collapse and fall into the street. And I almost got fined also because the delay with insurance and all this other stuff, my insurance company ended up denying me, so I had to pay for it all out of my own pocket. But I did site plans, I had the surveys, I had all the information, I went to the zoning officer and I said, listen, I'm on the board. He knows I'm on the board. I said, you make sure you triple check this stuff, make sure it's right. And if there's something that I have to do, I'll do it. Just tell me what it is. And he said, no, that's the wall I was putting back was lower than the wall that fell. So he said, because you're doing less than what you had before, you don't have to do anything more. You can repair. And he issued me a permit, and I had the placard in my window, and I hired an excellent mason who moved to South Carolina after he finished my project. But he did a beautiful job. I absolutely love my retaining walls now that they're fixed. But that's a problem, and you need to get some advice from your professionals. But only the mayor and council can authorize construction in a street or somewhere off of your own property. And you can't build stuff on your neighbor's property, and we get that a lot too. Yeah, we had somebody expand their garage onto the neighbor's property.
Yeah, my only concern.
And the neighbor was fine with it, but we couldn't allow it. It couldn't be allowed, yeah. Yes?
Just a question as far as zoning review is concerned. So I want to put a bathroom in my basement.
Yeah.
What is zoning looking at when they're looking at that review?
They're going to want,
Not doing anything.
they're going to want plans of every level of the house
Okay.
because you're putting a bathroom in a basement. And if there's an exterior door from the basement into the yard, there's always a concern that somebody might be trying to create a rentable unit or an apartment in a single family house. So they want to see all those plans, they go into the file, and it's a single family house, it shows it's a single family house, you're putting a bathroom in the basement, there's nothing that prevents that in the building code, but that's what they're looking for, and that's why they want to know that.
Just have a wife and 3 daughters.
Yes, oh no, I've been, yes, okay.
Now, do I need all the floors?
Yeah, have the floor plans done so that the zoning officer, because if you don't give it to him, he's going to ask for it. Yes.
I have a problem. I had a contractor do siding and roofing, and it's a nightmare. But I have a flat roof in the back of my house that
Okay.
potentially will have to be totally ripped off.
Okay.
There's wood rot, but the guy who's going to replace the siding said to me they won't know how bad it is, or if it needs to be all taken, the 3 boards
Right.
down. What do I do as far as a permit is concerned if I don't know until they have to take down the siding the extent of the potential damage? Because I
Okay.
currently have water leakage in that room because of the roof.
Okay, you don't need a building permit to do what we call destructive investigation. And it is exactly what it sounds like. You rip stuff off until you can ascertain what the issues are that you're going to be facing. Then you apply for the appropriate permits to fix what you're doing. Now, when you do destructive investigation, you can cover it with a tarp to protect it in the interim. But you really need to investigate what it is exactly you need to do, and you should get a professional, not necessarily a contractor. The advice the contractor gives you, he benefits financially from the advice he gives you. You might want to seek, like a doctor, get a second opinion.
I have a home inspector right
Okay.
now, but I would need the permit if they have to totally tear down the roof.
Roofing does not require a permit any longer.
If it's all rotted, they claim that they.
If they have to do structural repair, that would need inspection.
Okay.
That would need inspection. But you can go to the building department or call the building department and ask. If you don't need a permit, they'll tell you. If you need a permit, they will tell you. If they're not sure, they'll tell you to come in and show them what you have. photos, describe what's going on. That they can help you with.
Thank you.
Yeah. You're always better off asking I always tell people to do this. So you don't need a permit, call up, tell them what you're doing. If they tell you you don't need a permit, get the name of the person you were talking to, date and time. They told me I didn't need a permit. Because when the inspector shows up and he says, oh, you need a permit for that, then you can pull out your notes, and that can be a defense when you're trying to explain to the inspector, listen, I tried to comply. I called. This is what I was told. That can be very helpful. Yes?
Just a quick question. With the variance process in my situation with the four-bedroom garage thing, how long, once I'm denied by the zoning, how long does that process typically take for something of that nature?
It typically takes about 3 months. That's 3 months if you get everything right. And you provide all the information that's needed and all the forms are filled out correctly. It takes about 3 months.
Just to get that process, and then still have to get the approval from the building.
Right. The building department can't review your building permit application until after you have your zoning board approval, and the zoning board has to memorialize its decision in writing, which you get a copy of, and that decision gets published in the borough newspaper. There's hands up everywhere. Yeah.
I just wanted to.
Yes.
Say the zoning board meets once a month, so.
Once a month, except that there are occasions where we have special meetings. Yes, Mr. Conklin.
Yeah, I've been through the whole variance.
Yes, you have.
I
Yes.
tried the whole thing.
Yes.
If, as Mr. Martin said, you dot your i's, cross your t's, it isn't as bad as it sounds.
Right.
But it does take X amount of time.
It does. It takes an excruciatingly long period of time.
You'll go nuts.
Yeah, you're better off not applying. If there's a way that you can accomplish what you want without violating the zoning, if you comply with the zoning, do it that way. And I tell my clients this all the time. It's not worth going to the zoning board unless you absolutely have to. And if you don't absolutely have to, you could get to the zoning board and the zoning board could say, well, why don't you just move it over 6 inches? And if you could do that and it doesn't completely wreck your entire house, they're going to deny you, and they're going to make you do it that way anyway. So you're always better off trying to conform to the zoning as best you can. Yes, ma'am.
What is, when you were talking about encroaching a building or, for instance, a fence?
Right.
That has been built on someone else's property?
Right.
How does that happen with zoning and building and a permit if it's been signed off and?
Fences are supposed to be put on the surveys. When the fence company installs the fence, it's supposed to put it in the right place. Okay? It's impossible to know if they actually do that or not until the next survey. There's plenty of instances over the last 50, 60 years where a neighbor put up a fence where there was a hedge line. The hedge line died 40 years ago. The fence was replaced twice since then, but it's 2 feet onto the neighbor's property. That becomes essentially a dispute between neighbors. When people come to me with that kind of a thing, I just say, tear the fence down, move it onto your own property, and come 6 inches in from where the property line is. Have the surveyor come and stake the property so you know exactly where that line is. He certifies where that line is. The fence company puts it 6 inches inside that line, and then you're covered. Yes, sir.
The variance is granted, is there any time limit before you can break ground?
A time limit before you can break ground?
So I've got a variance for the garage on my house, and I said I haven't broken ground. It's coming in about 1 year since we got the variance. And we're probably gonna break down right after the first of the year.
Oh, you mean, does it expire?
Yes, I have a variance already. It doesn't
Okay.
expire.
It does expire after 2 years, but hold on. But you can apply to have an extension. And the board does hear and grant extensions on a fairly regular basis, because sometimes people get approval and something happens. Either they lose the funding or something happens in the family and they don't have the resources, but they don't want to have to go through the variance process again. You just have to be aware of it, and before it expires, apply to have it extended. It's a fairly easy process. There's no application. I don't even think there's a fee. You submit a letter and the board will discuss it and then amend its resolution to extend the time.
One question.
Sure.
On the changes from the plan. On the plan now, it shows a front step being 6 foot. The existing steps on the house, 7'6".
Yeah.
And I would like to just use some of that existing stairs when I put the new awning in front of the house. Would that have to be marked on the plans?
So are you saying that the variance was granted and your steps were shown at 6 foot, but they're really 7 foot?
No, the new plans that we have drawn show new steps going in.
Okay.
The new steps now are showed at 6 foot. The existing steps are just a little over 7 foot.
Yeah, that's something you go and talk to the zoning officer about that.
It doesn't actually go into
It it may not have anything to do with the reason that you were granted the variance. That's why I say go in and talk to them, because if it does have something to do with the reason you were granted the variance, you're going to send you back.
well, what I'll do then is I'll just knock the step down.
Make it right. Right. Right, but it's worth a conversation with the officials at Borough Hall. They're not looking to cause you problems. As I explained, they have very strict rules that they have to follow. Yes, ma'am.
One, well, it's to ask your wisdom. There seems to be a lot of parking and garages and all this stuff is tied in. With the Board of Adjustment and the number of variances that come in for things like parking, driveways, garages,
Yeah.
is there any formal process or even an informal process to talk to or address in any way, shape, or form the no overnight parking on any street in Westford?
All right, no overnight parking is not a zoning matter. That's a mayor and council matter. We can't grant you, the zoning board can't grant you a variance for that.
But you would have input based on the amount of work people are doing to deal with that.
Actually, we don't have any input on that. That has nothing to do with our duties as the zoning board in reviewing variances that are being requested from the zoning.
Not formal input, I'm sorry, but you could give input saying that everybody's looking for a garage or a driveway or have issues, which may relate to no overnight parking.
Every year, the zoning board is required by statute to provide to the governing body what is called the annual report. The annual report from the zoning board lists out all the variances that are granted in the previous year. That information is transmitted to the mayor and council so that they can review it. If there is a consistent application being made for a certain type of variance, the mayor and council may wish to adjust the ordinance to make it easier for that, or they may not. They may send the annual report to the planning board and ask the planning board, because the planning board does the master plan review. They may comment on it. But as far as being allowed to park in the street or not, the streets, the sidewalks, that's all mayor and council. Planning board and zoning board have nothing to do with that at all.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes?
Handicap ramp,
Yes.
okay, temporary.
Yes.
Do I need permit that's not built into the house?
If you need it, you put it up. Okay? It's a temporary ramp. I believe up to 180 days. If you need it beyond that, you're going to need to apply for a permit to keep it. That's how that works. I usually advise people to try to put them in the rear of the house. Sometimes you can't do that. The borough officials understand why, people suddenly need these things. I mean, things happen. So if you go and have one of those temporary, the metal ramps that have the adjustable ones, you just let the building department know, I'm doing this because I'm in a wheelchair for 3 months. And they'll say, okay, after a certain period of time, you're going to need to apply for a permit to make it permanent, even if it's of a temporary nature, because it technically covers ground, so it's restricted by zoning.
Now I'm thinking of putting a new door or a sliding glass door
Yeah.
on my kitchen.
Okay?
Okay, do I have to do new plans? Which I did one for the bathroom, but that was...
I'm not sure I understand. The changing of a door in the same opening does not require a permit. Oh, you're making a new opening? If you're making a new opening, there's a structural beam that goes over the top of that. That requires a permit.
and you with the temporary, the handicap steps or ramp.
Well, you're mixing two different things together.
Well, there's gonna be two things,
Okay,
probably.
but the reason for the permit for the door is because of the structural header. It has nothing to do with your handicap ramp. The handicap ramp is a separate issue. Just talk to the official and they'll kind of unpack it and they'll explain how you get to compliance.
Okay, thank you.
No, you're welcome. Yes?
It seems like a lot of people feel that the permit paperwork is just like overwhelming for this town, more so than other towns. My sister and brother-in-law had a shed put in their backyard, and to get somebody to do the paperwork for them was, like, they were like, what town? Westwood. Oh, yeah, their permits are, you know, is there a reason for that?
I hear that all the time. It's simply not correct. The process is basically uniform throughout the entire state. Some towns have a little bit more paperwork than others, but Westwood actually doesn't have as much as some other towns do. So it's really not the case. I know the perception is because you have to deal with it. I mean, welcome
seems like it's a
welcome
check,
to New
and it's
Jersey.
just,
Yeah,
you
New
know.
Jersey is like this. You know, it's
Okay.
we're the most densely populated state of the 50 states. The bureaucracy and the overlapping laws and the paperwork and the permits, and it's just it's overwhelming.
Just one last question.
Yeah.
My basement, my house is very old.
Okay.
I have a toilet in my basement
Yeah.
that's lifted up on a piece
Yeah,
of.
yep, that's a Pittsburgh potty.
Okay. If it has to get changed, am I gonna have an issue?
What do you mean changed?
Like if I have to replace the toilet or anything like
Well,
that?
replacing a fixture, same for same in the same location, I don't believe that's a permit. That's ordinary maintenance.
Oh, okay. Okay, great.
I think maybe if there's time, one more question, and if not,
I
then-
can also talk about aging in place issues. I didn't touch on it, but I can if you have questions about that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
You just want it.
Yeah.